Welcome back to Old School Sports and our Out of the Park Baseball 24 playthrough of the Buffalo Wings. And just want to start off by thanking all of you who've been patient with us over the past week without any episodes. As I mentioned, had to head out of town for business for several days to South Florida. And then I ended up tacking on a couple days at the end of that trip to see some family down there. But got back home in the warm north late last evening, and we are ready to get things moving forward here in this 2044 off season. And as we've talked about in previous episodes, going to be a very busy off season for the Buffalo Wings. Our number 2 and 3 starters, Alexis Barajas and Eric Barbarito, both could be moving on. Our starting first baseman, Daniel Rojas, who led the team in homers and ribbies, could likely be moving on. The good, I don't want to call him young anymore, but the good outfielder, Josh Porter, who's now 31, could be moving on. And then, most importantly, even though the impact on the field is probably less than any of the other 4 players that I mentioned, Deshaun Seifu, former number 1 overall pick who has had a Hall of Fame caliber career with the Buffalo Wings. We have also declined our option on him, and he is a potential free agent as well. And we'll start off with Mr. Seifu. We'll jump right to the thing that many of you have opined on for us over the last week or so. What should we do with Deshaun Seifu? My only options that I put out there are to keep him and try to bring him back next year as a likely designated hitter / leadoff hitter against left-handed pitching only. He still has some speed. He still is a great influence in the clubhouse. He still is an Iron Man as far as his injury proneness, but he is incompetent defensively at this point, which is surprising for a guy who was a former Gold Glove winner at second base a couple times 15-ish years ago and was a long-time quality third baseman for us as well. But that's what's really aged out with him. His speed is declining certainly, but he's still a pretty proficient base runner and a pretty good base stealer. He was 23 of 28 on the base paths this year. Looking at his splits, he did hit over 300 this past year against left-handed pitching and is a career .314 hitter with a 130 WRC plus against left-handed pitching. Not quite the same situation against right-handers, where he's a .285 hitter with a 103 WRC plus over the course of his career and a sickly 44 WRC plus this past season. And he's been a below-average offensive player against right-handed pitchers now 6 of the past 7 years. So we don't expect that to change anytime soon. But my only decisions were to keep him and bring him back or to manually retire him. I'm not going to let him go off and hit free agency to try to save a few bucks with the risk that we might lose him, or he might end up as a OOTP nomad playing as a future Hall of Famer in his early 40s in AA or AAA or the independent leagues. So asked those viewers who were willing to share their opinions what we should do with Seifu, and I agreed that I would go with what the majority said. I have turned this decision over to our loyal viewers, and it's been going back and forth over the past week. It's been pretty close the entire time. Those in the keep camp include Fake Name, Jackhammer Possessor, Ben Mierig, Elkshi, Jarek Braxton, Justin Weeks, Stanley Rosella, and DLL 1B14. Those in the retire camp include Patrick DeBonis, YME943, Sean Gratton, Wesley Jones, Chuck Thulu, Jake Poston, David Chesley. So a lot of opinions from viewers whose opinions I respect on this topic. But if you've been keeping count, the vote ends up being a margin of a single vote, so every vote certainly mattered. And it was 8 keeps versus 7 retires. My personal vote would have been to retire, which would have pushed it to an 8-8 tie, but I said that I was going to turn this over to the voters. I'd love to see more of what Seifu can do, but I don't think he's one of the best 26 players on our roster. So just in terms of ease of the end of his career and ease of him not potentially being a less than perfect fit for the final roster spot on my roster, I was leaning towards retiring him, but my vote is not going to count here. This is going to be driven by the voters and the viewers. And the viewers who decided to become voters have spoken. So we are going to make an attempt to keep Mr. Seifu here. He's looking for, as you remember, 3 years at about $2.3 million a year with a vesting option for that final season. I think it's very unlikely he's going to get 490 playoff appearances 2 years from now if he's even playing. The money doesn't bother me. I'm going to try to get him for less, but I'm really going to try to get a team option for that second season to give us another potential out if this does go very badly. So we're going to offer Deshaun the 3 years he's looking for, but an average of only $1.9 million a year, 1.8 this upcoming year, 1.9 next year if we execute the team option, and then that vesting option for the 2047 season if he does hit 490 playoff appearances. We'll see what he thinks about this structure, and he's willing to think about it. So we are making an attempt to bring back the new Fordham Flash for hopefully only one final go-round with the Buffalo Wings in my mind, but I certainly don't want him playing for any other team. So my inclination would be to not let him hit free agency. We'll try to bring Seifu back. And the fun thing about this is this will give him a 20th Major League season, all spent with Buffalo. I'd be surprised if he even gets the 333 at-bats he got a year ago, because if you do remember, we did still have him in the starting lineup against right-handers for the first 2 months of the season before his performance convinced us he should be a platoon player going forward. But the fun thing about bringing him back is that even as a platoon player, he will likely have an opportunity to get the 35 runs to get to 1,800, the 15 hits to get to 3,200, the 5 doubles to get to 700. He'll have a chance at the 4 triples to get to 200, and he should almost certainly get the 8 steals needed to get to 1,300 in his career. So he'll likely be passing some round numbers next year if he does decide to re-sign with us for the offer that we've just put out there. So with the Seifu decision out of the way, and thanks again for all of you who shared your opinions on it. Like I said, I was leaning towards the retire camp. I didn't have a pound the table extremely strong decision one way or the other, so that's why I decided to go with the wisdom of our viewers. But I would have been perfectly content either way. We have made offers to all of our arbitration eligible players. Certainly could foresee some scenarios where second baseman Alejandro Contreras or shortstop Mike Whitehead aren't back with us at the major league level next year, particularly Contreras. But the numbers that they're looking for aren't so crazy that I don't think we could potentially trade them. We are intending to make qualifying offers to Alexis Barajas, Eric Barbarito, and Josh Porter if we don't re-sign any of them before the free agent period. Seifu, as you know, we've already made an offer to. Rojas, as we've talked about, led the team in homers and ribbies last year. He just completed a nice 4-year, $120 million contract with us that was pretty productive given that he was in his mid to late 30s throughout that contract. Over his 4 years in Buffalo, he put up a 136 WRC plus. with 30 homers and 91 ribbies a season for us. And as I talked about, led the team in homers and ribbies this past season, and coming off by far his best year in Buffalo. But he is 38 years old now, looking for about $25 million a year. The good thing is that we do have money to spend this offseason, with the relatively expensive Rojas potentially coming off the books and Barajas opting out of his contract, as well as the potential departures of Barbarito and Porter, who were both in their final arbitration seasons and making pretty good money this past year as well. So that, and the fact that we just moved up in market size, and we're coming off of a World Series winning year with the best record in baseball, where we played a lot of home games in the postseason, helped us generate an extremely profitable year. And our budget is now tied for 6th in the majors for this upcoming season. So I think there's a very good opportunity for us to be real competitive again this upcoming year, and to also be big players this offseason if we'd like to. And it could be our best last chance to hopefully finally get a repeat. We've got 4 World Series championships in Buffalo at this point, but have not successfully repeated any of those 3 previous times that we've won it all. The reason this could be the last big chance for us is that our longtime owner, Joel Farmer, has also sold the team. So we have a new owner going forward. Fortunately for us, Farmer established this increase in budget for this upcoming season because our new owner, Chris Ames, is an economizer in terms of his fiscal personality, and his priority is more profitability than winning. So I think it's extremely likely that our budget will be cut back, perhaps materially, for the 2046 season. So this is our perhaps final chance to really go all in the spending as we try to get a repeat here in Buffalo. And we talked about at the end of previous episodes the potential free agents for this upcoming season. With all that money we have to spend, and there are a ton of familiar names, former players: Mitch Houlihan, Tyreek Hardage, Tim Gaglia, Bobby Bolig, Steve Anderson, all on the market, along with shortstops that we've thought about in the past, Jaheim Lawal, and most notably Roman Maples. The top end of the market has some pretty interesting hitters in their late 20s with Mike Whitman and Ming Ya, but they're also both looking for well over $30 million and have some negative personality traits. I think they could both certainly help our offense, but with the fact that we've got Coma Duran, Boston, Velasco, Canales, and Reichert all definitely coming back, who could be outfielders and or in some cases a first baseman or DH for us. I don't feel like we have to go crazy at the top of the market. Doug Nugent at second baseman is an interesting bat for the infield, but doesn't really bring defensively what I'm looking for, given that he's 33 years old and he's also looking for over $33 million a year. I don't think we'll go there. Shamar Badio is similar to Whitman in Ming Ya, and it brings some unfavorable traits into the clubhouse. He's also going to be 38 years old before the season starts, and he is fragile. So I don't think we're going to be playing right at the top end of the free agent market. I know some of you have brought up the point that Whitman's personality is pretty negative, which I touched upon, and Ming Ya is also not the greatest in the clubhouse. Given that I think we have really improved our left-handed hitting capabilities over the last couple of off seasons, really last off season with the trade for Boston and the trade for Reichert to supplement them in with the youngster Canales and then re-signing of Coma Duran. We've got enough left-handed hitters of high quality right now. So the guys that I'm inclined to spend some of our money on are the guys that are kind of proven within our organization. Rojas, we talked about coming off of his best year with us, 38 years old, looking for 3 years at $25 million a year. And then Josh Porter, who is a guy that we haven't done a great job getting consistent playing time to every season. He's been a part of our organization for 5 years now, and you can see he's gotten over 453 at-bats just once in his career with us. But we like his defensive profile. We like his speed. He's durable. He's a solid hitter. And he can play against both righties and lefties. We've often had him in more of a platoon role against only left-handed pitching. But he's a lot younger than Rojas. He's better defensively than Rojas. And he's also not looking for nearly as much money as Rojas. And because he's so good defensively, bringing the Skull Porter back does let us potentially have him play a more prominent role, likely as a corner outfielder, a very high-quality defensive corner outfielder, and then move the likes of Reichert, Boston, or Coma Duran to first base. And it's also conceivable that one of those players could be getting DH time against right-handed pitching opposite Deshaun Seifu. So I'm going to try to bring Josh Porter back, 4 years, almost $18 million a year. Hopefully we can get him for a little less than that money-wise. He does want some player opt-outs after year one, which I'm not necessarily thrilled with. But given that we're expecting our budget to be cut back significantly next season, it wouldn't necessarily be the worst thing in the world if we have to include it. I'm certainly going to try to not include it. Normally an opt-out after 1 year would be a pretty pure deal breaker for me. But in this situation where it's conceivable that our budget gets cut back by $25 million next season, it could even be worse than that, quite honestly. I might be willing to keep it in. And we're probably going to not make Porter really happy with this offer. He was looking at 4 years, $17.75 million a year with a player opt-out after year one and a player option for Team 4. We're cutting the money back to $16 million a year, and there's a team option on the final year of the contract. He's really insistent on getting a player option, and he's really insistent on us promising him a role in the starting lineup. So, not surprisingly, this negotiation is going to be a little trickier than I perhaps hoped. And we'll make it a little more favorable to Porter, an average of $17 million a year over 3 years with a player option for that final season. We're trying to avoid promising him a starting role. My goal would be that he would be in the lineup against right-handed pitching next year in addition to left-handed pitching, particularly with the amount of money that we're going to be paying him. But given that we do have so many left-handed hitting and switch hitting outfielders, I don't want to box myself into a corner with him as far as his attitude with the team and him potentially being a disruptive influence by guaranteeing that to him. If I have to do it, I'll certainly do it. I have a feeling if he doesn't accept this offer, next shot could be our last chance with him. But right now I'm still going to try to get the deal that we want before caving in and giving him everything he's looking for. Yeah, and he's insistent that he gets that starting lineup role. So we'll have to include that at this point and deal with the ramifications. Hopefully, with the money we're paying him, he'll, given that he is good defensively, we'll be able to find a spot for him against both right-handed and left-handed pitching. And if we don't, we'll have to deal with the ramifications of making him angry. So we're still not giving him exactly what he wants. We're trying to get a 3-year deal with the third year being a player option. He wanted a 2-year deal with the second year deal being a player option. We have promised him a role in the starting lineup, 16 each of the next 2 years, $18 million a year for the potential third option year. And he's willing to consider that. So we've got an offer out to Mr. Porter, 3 years, $50 million. We'll see where that goes. Now the next decision is what to do with starting pitching. Kind of alluded to this in the last episode. We're not going to bring Eric Barbarito back at the money he's looking for. 7 years, over $20 million a year. He's a good, solid major league starter, but over the course of his career, 106 ERA plus, 89 FIP minus. He's an above average pitcher, but he's not an exceptional pitcher. I mean, you can see he's got a 62-55 record while pitching for a team that has won a couple of World Series and been a perennial playoff appearance team that has often had 100 wins over the course of his career. So he's a solid pitcher, but not a real frontline starter. Barajas, as we talked about, opted out of his contract. He's 36 years old now. His ratings are still strong. His performance is still strong. Led the National League with an 18-2 record, 2.46 ERA, 4.3 WAR on the year. He's an Iron Man. And he's honestly only looking for $22.7 million a year, which is only a little bit more than the $20 million he was set to make this upcoming season that he opted out from. He's just looking for more assurance. I don't think I want to give a 36-year-old starter a 6-year deal, especially with a player option for his age 41 season in the final year of the deal. But Barajas is in the mix for us to spend some of this money on because, as I mentioned, we're potentially losing our second and third starters with Barajas and Barbarito. When we take a look at the upcoming free agents on the pitching side, Barajas right on the top of the list. The other two premier starters who are out there, Pete McLaughlin, 33 years old, really like him as well. Think he could be a nice addition to our team. Extreme ground ball pitcher who throws in the low to mid 90s. Expected to be looking for about $26 million a year. And Ron Whitmer also expected to be looking for that amount. His stuff probably not quite as strong as Barajas or McLaughlin's, but excellent movement and excellent control on his pitches. He's the youngest of the bunch, just about to turn 32 years old. Coming off of a bit of an off year, 9-12 with a 4.45 ERA, but also need to keep in mind that he's pitching half of his games in Colorado. Throws even harder, high 90s with those extreme ground ball tendencies. Also expected to be looking for about $26 million. So any of those three would be a really nice addition to our squad. I think I'm going to try to bring Barajas back right now if I can do it in a 3 to 4 year kind of deal rather than a 5 or 6 year kind of deal. The interesting thing about this is that particularly if we get Porter and Seifu signed, as well as Barajas signed, we still could be going into the off season with enough money to potentially even make a play at McLaughlin or Whitmer in addition to Barajas if the price for them is reasonable enough. And there's certainly no guarantees that we're going to get something done with Barajas, because either he's going to have to give on the amount of years, or we may have to give on the amount of years to ultimately get a deal done. But even if we sign Barajas now, it doesn't preclude us, given that, as I've talked about, we are kind of in total win now mode to have enough money left to go after a McLaughlin or a Whitmer, or potentially enough money left to maybe ultimately go after a Roman Maples or a Jaheim Lawal down the line to potentially take over and strengthen our infield defense at shortstop, while likely also improving our bat there a bit. So Barajas looking for 6 years, $22.7 million. Player option for the final season, no trade clause, starting rotation. I can include the no trade clause because he's already got 10-5 rights with us as soon as he resigns with us, if he resigns with us. So if it makes him feel better for me to include the explicit no trade clause, no harm, no foul, since he's got it anyways. So we're going to try to cut down the money a little bit, but more importantly, try to cut down the years a little more significantly than a little bit. And we're going to come back with him, and we're not really going too low on the money. We're giving him $22 million a year for 4 years, so the average amount is only $666,000 less than he was looking for. The issue is we're cutting it back to 4 years from 6 years, and we're making that 4th and final year a team option rather than the 6th and final year being a player option as he was looking for. No trade clause, promised role in the starting rotation, the bonuses he was looking for, all in there. We'll see what he thinks. And he's willing to think about it. So to me, this is a good compromise. We'll have him back for his age 36, 37, and 38 seasons potentially. Hopefully he'll kind of be what he has been for at least a couple of those years. So we'll submit that offer to Mr. Barajas, and now we've got offers outstanding to Seifu, Porter, and Barajas. Barbarito and Rojas likely to both hit free agency. But as I talked about, we do have potentially enough money available, even with the offers we've made, to be players for one more big ticket item if we so desire when free agency actually does begin. So I think at this point it's time to start simming forward and time to see what happens with the free agent offers, or not free agent offers, but with the extension offers we've made to our potential free agents, the offers we've made to all of our arbitration eligible players, as well as a wide number of minor league free agents that we're looking to bring back. And we'll also get into award season and find out, in addition to being World Series champions, whether any Buffalo Wings win some significant personal hardware this offseason. And good news, Deshaun Seifu will be back for a 20th season in Buffalo next year. As we've talked about, it's probably going to be in a DH-only role against left-handed pitching and as a pinch runner on occasion for us. So could conceivably be a role where he'll only get a couple hundred at-bats, but still will be a good influence in the clubhouse when he is in the clubhouse, and more importantly, when he is in the lineup against left-handed pitching. Don't expect him to get hurt, and he can potentially hit some of those milestones that we've talked about this season. And we've got a player option on him for next year where maybe we'll be going through this same discussion. I did think it would have been really cool if I had retired Seifu after he won a World Series championship. Not a lot of players, especially Hall of Fame type caliber players, end up hanging it up in their late 30s and early 40s after having had the storybook ending of going out with a World Series championship, which Seifu would have had if we had retired him this year. But the crowd and the wisdom of the crowd has spoken, and I'm excited that we will be having Mr. Seifu back for a 20th season in Buffalo in the 2045 season. And also started to get some of our arbitration-eligible players signed. Chris Malone, Mike Whitehead, Floyd Auclair, Kevin Hale, Jim Lance, fans were excited about some of those deals. Alejandro Contreras, Ramiro Medina will be back. And we also signed a great young hitting coach, Kurt Wentz. We had an opening on our FCL team, and Kurt Wentz was available. He's 53 years old. He's unproven, but outstanding at teaching hitting, excellent with development, legendary with mechanics, and also expected to have good relationships with our players down there. So I think he can be very effective with our rookie league draftees in the early years of their career, and would expect that Wentz could be someone who moves up through our organization on the coaching side going forward. And at this point, we've got all of our arbitration eligible players signed, so that happened very quickly. Still waiting to hear from Barajas and Porter on the offers that we made to them. Barbarito, as we talked about, we're going to submit a QO to him. Hope he won't accept it, particularly if we get Barajas locked up, but would not be the end of the world if he did. And then Rojas, I think we're going to let him go. It's not inconceivable that if we've got money and he lingers on the free agent market a bit, and the shortstops and the starting pitchers that we might be a bit more interested in don't end up signing with us, that we could revisit things with Rojas down the line. But if we bring Porter back, we don't really need him. And I know that's a weird thing to say about a guy who just led your team in homers and ribbies, but we let a guy who led our team in ribbies 4 straight years go last off season, and we may be letting the guy who replaced him as our team leader in ribbies go this coming off season. Juan Romero, of course, is the guy that had been with us and been a very effective offensive player who we decided to let go last year, and all we did was win the World Series without him. So perhaps we could do the same thing if we let Rojas go this offseason. And given that shortstop is a position we would like to improve for the next year or two until the guy who we think is our shortstop of the future, Josh Fuchs, is ready to go, we've gotten a couple of interesting trade offers. You may remember the name Toby Golston, a guy who we've looked at in free agency and the trade market in recent years. A good defensive shortstop. He's fragile physically, not the best influence in the clubhouse. Does have a little pop in his bat, coming off a year where he hit only .221 with a league worst 223 strikeouts for the Yankees. But he did hit 21 homers and had a 2 WAR on the year given his good defense. Honestly, his profile isn't all that different from Fuchs. We hope that Fuchs will be a little better defensively. We hope that Fuchs will be better in the clubhouse. And we hope that Fuchs will eventually strike out less than Golston. But the pop that Golston has is what we think we might have in Fuchs with a couple of years. They're looking for Arturo Casares, though, who's one of the top prospects in our system, the number 18 prospect in baseball. Given that we only have 1 year of Golston next year, and he's fragile and not the best influence in the clubhouse, giving up one of the top prospects in our system for him doesn't intrigue me all that much, especially with guys like Maples and Lawal at shortstop potentially hitting the free agent market. But the other option is a little more interesting to me. We have to give up Eric Fisher, who is a top 100 prospect, a former second-round draft pick, 12-8 with a 3.59 ERA in Double-A Albany this year. He is older, 24 years old. He hasn't progressed incredibly quickly through our system, but certainly has a profile that he could be a really good 4th starter, an excellent 5th starter, and probably a fine 3rd starter in the majors in the not too distant future. So I don't love potentially giving up Mr. Fisher, but the guy that we would get is Damani Essien, 31-year-old durable shortstop with 70 range, 70 arm. He can play any position in the infield at a pretty high level. You can see he has been a perennial Gold Glove winner in the past. Won 4 Gold Gloves at second base and 1 at third base. I would envision him as a shortstop for us just because that 70 range would be the best on our team. He signed for another 2 years, $19.6 million next year, and then a player option for $19.6 million. So the timing could work out really well with Fuchs. And as I noted, we do have money to spend this off season. His bat is not incredible, but he's a good contact hitter, good gap power, doesn't strike out much, and has enough speed to at least take some advantage of that good gap power he has. Not going to hit a ton of homers, but over the course of his career, he's got a 97 WRC plus and 95 OPS plus. So he's been close to a league average offensive player. And he's put up a 33.2 WAR over the course of his career, largely driven by his defense. So given that it's not a real long-term commitment, which we don't really want at shortstop, given that we still think Fuchs is our shortstop of the future, I'm definitely intrigued by bringing Essien in. We've got, as I talked about, the money to do it. Now, this would basically mean that we're not going to go for one of those other shortstops I mentioned or supplement with even another frontline starter in the offseason. But when I take a look at those upcoming free agents at shortstop, potential free agents, Roman Maples, the fact that he's wrecked physically and 36 years old scares me. He'd be real popular with the fans. I think his bat, coming off of a year with a 140 WRC plus, is certainly more productive. But he doesn't have quite the same range at this point. And the fact that he's wrecked physically, likely looking for even more money than we'd be paying. And there's no guarantees that the Royals will ultimately let him hit the market, since he's been in the organization with the Royals for almost as long as we've had Deshaun Seifu. No guarantees that he's going to be there. Jaheim Lawal is looking for very similar money and has a somewhat similar profile. Contact hitter with good gap power, no home run power. Not quite as good with his eye and avoiding strikeouts. He's fragile physically. He's got a lot more speed. Similar range defensively, probably a more positive influence in the clubhouse. But Lawal, over the course of his career, has actually been not as good an offensive player. They're similar age. But when we stack those two up against each other, Essien, even though he's almost a year and a half older, better contact, similar gap power, better home run power, better eye, and much better at avoiding strikeouts. So not shocking that he is a guy who's put up close to league average offense, while Lawal's been about 20% below league average over the course of his career. And looking at the defensive ratings, the range is the same, the error is the same, the arm strongly favors Essien, the turn double play rating strongly favors Lawal. But there's no guarantee that Lawal will hit the market. We think he's going to be looking for a bit more money than we'd be paying Essien next year. And it's conceivable that we might have to make a commitment to Lawal that's more significant in terms of the number of years than the fact that Essien could be one and done with us, or even worst case scenario, if he opts in, he's only with us 2 years, at which point, hopefully, Fuchs is the answer by then. And if not, we've got other situations to figure out. And Essien is also durable as opposed to the fragile Lawal and the wrecked physically Maples. So I'm going to try to get them to maybe keep a little bit of Essien's money to get this done. I don't love giving up Fisher, but we've got pretty good pitching depth in our organization, and Fisher, as I said, is probably a 4th or 5th starter for us. I think he could be a 3rd starter on many teams. Hopefully our pitching will be good enough that he'd never be a 3 for us. And I just think that adding a really good defensive shortstop, given that we're a pitching and defense team that we don't have to make a long-term commitment to, given that we do think Fuchs is still the future, is kind of the potential perfect move for us, just falling right into our laps. And we've got a deal done for Domani Essien where we're getting them to keep 20% of his contract, which helps us a little bit, particularly if our budget does get cut next year. We're not going to be big players in free agency this year if we bring him on board, but it does make it a little bit more palatable to us if he opts into that contract a year from now. We have to include Fisher, which we're comfortable with. We need to include Juan Arriola, who is a 26-year-old second baseman. Good personality, a guy that we've kept around the system because of that, but certainly not a prospect at almost 27 years old, given his offensive and defensive limitations. But we would also need to include Alejandro Contreras. But if we make this trade for Essien, we're going to be moving Mike Whitehead from our starting shortstop role to a utility infielder role that Contreras currently occupies. So it's really a matter of whether we want Whitehead or Contreras around. Whitehead is making more money, but he's also been a bit better player for us. Contreras, almost 29 years old at this point. We still believe he's got a little bit of ability to improve his contact, his home run power, and his eye, but as a soon-to-be 29-year-old with low adaptability and work ethic, I do think that is truly a mirage at this point. Solid defensive player, but he's coming off a year where he hit just $167 for us with a 52 WRC plus. Over the course of his career, he still is an 87 WRC plus for us. He's been a acceptable offensive player given his defensive versatility at times. But he's also a guy who's out of options this year. We mentioned at the start of the episode that we had made an offer to him in arbitration, which he's accepted, so he's got a guaranteed major league contract. And given that I'd rather have Whitehead on the team, given that Whitehead's kind of a better personality than Seifu is at this point. And Whitehead also is a guy who was our starting shortstop this past year. Whitehead over the course of his career, 88 WRC plus, so basically in the exact same neighborhood as Contreras. Just feel like Whitehead's better in the clubhouse. We could include Whitehead instead of Contreras, and that would save us more money next year. But I don't think Contreras is going to develop any further. I don't love the low adaptability and work ethic and the influence that can have on other players. So we're going to go ahead and make this deal, and that'll mean Essien is penned in as our starting shortstop next year. Whitehead moves back to more of a utility infielder role, and the experiment with Contreras, who we thought might end up becoming a big-time infielder for us when we traded away Guadalupe Amezcua, as well as several other players for him several years ago, comes to an end. It's expensive for a guy who could be a one-year rental, but it's not cripplingly expensive in my view. And as I talked about, we're never going to have this type of budget ever again with this team. Essien at shortstop really solidifies the infield defense on this pitching and defense team and hopefully gives us the best chance possible to repeat next year. Might have been interesting to see what happened with Maples or Lawal in free agency. This trade will take us out of being big players in free agency this year if we do also sign Barajas and Porter in the coming days. But I think it fits perfectly with what we're trying to do, so we're going to go ahead and complete that deal. Fans real excited to have Essien on board, and we wish Fisher, Arriola, and Alejandro Contreras well in the Marlins organization. And the other thing that I'm sure some of you noted when you were looking at him is that Essien is also a left-handed hitting infielder, similar to Fuchs in what he will be. Well, he already is, but hopefully he will be at the major league level with us in a year or two. So I think Essien is potentially an incredible bridge to Mr. Fuchs, who, as I said, hopefully puts us in a position to maximize the probability of a repeat next season. And good news, Alexis Barajas will be back, likely as our number 2 starter. Ended up signing that 4-year deal at $22 million a year. We've got a team option for that final year, so it's conceivable it may be only a 3-year deal. He's still an Iron Man. His ratings are still strong, and he's coming off of a really good year. It's logical that he'll begin to regress over the next 2 to 3 years, which is why I'm glad we turned it into a 3, possibly 4-year contract rather than a contract that would have been up to 6 years, which is what he was looking for. And he's only going to make $2 million more next year than if he had just opted into the contract we had him. So not incredibly more expensive from our perspective. Gives a pitcher who is been excellent for us, along with Safe, who has been a member of all 4 of our World Series winning teams, a little more financial security and the opportunity to potentially conclude his career with the Buffalo Wings. And award season is now underway. I'd say a bit surprising for a team that was a World Series champion with the best record in baseball, that was first in defensive efficiency and first in zone rating in the National League, but no Gold Gloves for the Buffalo Wings this year. So once again, just very good defense everywhere, but apparently no great defense anywhere. Maybe Essien will help change that next season. Not surprisingly, though, we do have another Mariano Rivera Award winner. Thought that Floyd Auclair and Joe Scott would both get votes. Joe Scott did get some votes. He is a 2-time Mariano Rivera Award winner, led the league with 51 saves this year, 2.89 ERA, 102 strikeouts in 87 1/3 innings, and a 3.2 WAR. So another excellent year for our longtime, at this point, closer. But he finished 4th in the voting behind Jeremy Barr, Marquis Bethea, and most importantly, Floyd Auclair, our stopper, who with 22 first-place votes ran away with the award. Auclair leads the league in games and holds for a 2nd consecutive year a ridiculous 227 strikeouts and 143 1/3 innings pitched, 2.51 ERA, 4.3 WAR, 164 ERA plus, 57 FIP minus, and a 1.76 SIERA. So just a brilliant year for the now 27-year-old who has signed his arbitration eligible deal with us and will be back as our stopper in front of Joe Scott again next season. And Auclair will be doing it now as a player who was a First-time All-Star this year, a first-time Major League Baseball champion this year, and now he's also a first-time Mariano Rivera Award winner. And we've now got Josh Porter re-signed as well. So honestly, I don't think we have anything to do with our position players this upcoming offseason with Porter re-signing and the trade for Essien. And really pitching-wise, with Barajas coming back, we don't have a ton of holes there either. Would certainly love to add another high-end starter or reliever. I don't think a high-end starter is really realistic with the money that we have left at this point. And probably not quite necessary with Lance and Barajas back at the top of our rotation. But feeling good to have Porter on board. And with Porter and Barajas re-sign and the trade for Essien, we're still going into the offseason with about $16 million to spend, with $20 million scouting budget and a $40 million player development budget. So we're in a pretty good financial situation. We're not going to be playing at the top end of the market, but I don't think we necessarily need to with the moves that we've made. Coming up with another award, the Silver Sluggers, Daniel Rojas, who will now almost certainly be an ex-Buffalo Wing after 4 nice years with us, named a Silver Slugger. I think this is his first. He did win it with us the first year. I thought this was the first time he won it with us, but he actually did win it. The first one his career back in 2041 in his first season with us. And Tim Boston is named the designated hitter Silver Slugger winner. This is a guy we picked up in a trade with the Red Sox just over a year ago. Hit .294, 25 homers, 89 ribbies. Certainly will be in the mix to likely be a DH or first baseman for us next year with the addition of Porter, or not really the addition of Porter, but with the fact that we're bringing Porter back, that gives us a much higher quality corner outfielder than Tim Boston. So he'll likely be in the mix to be a first baseman, DH, possibly a left fielder next year. Coma Duran and Reichert are kind of the other guys who are in the mix for those positions as well. So 2 Silver Sluggers this year, Rojas and Boston for the Buffalo Wings. And not shockingly for a team that has been a perennial playoff contender, but we've had a ton of managers of the years over the course of this playthrough. Some of them were me back when I was a GM/manager before I gave that up about a decade ago, I think, at this point. But Nomar Rengifo, manager of the year for a second consecutive season for the Buffalo Wings. So it's been a pretty rewarding award season thus far. Still got the big ones ahead with the Cy Young and the MVP. Don't think we end up winning either of those. Would not be shocked to see Barajas and Auclair get some votes for Cy Young, and would not be shocked to see Rojas get a little support for MVP. But certainly don't expect that we'll win either of those years, particularly MVP, where I think Irving Barunda of the Expos is an exceptional candidate for that award this year. And not shockingly, we did not have a player win the Cy Young Award or the MVP. Chris Newell of the Detroit Tigers, an almost unanimous Cy Young Award winner in the American League. 20-6 record with a 2.11 ERA. The 20 wins and the 2.11 ERA were both league best. Also struck out 297 batters. So not a shock to see him winning the AL Cy Young Award. National League, Pete McLaughlin, who's going to be headed to free agency, was a guy that we were talking about not too long ago, but we've gone in a different direction with re-signing Barajas. 13-9 with a 2.43 ERA, led the National League with a 68 FIP minus and a 5.7 WAR among pitchers, wins the award. Alexis Mendoza, interestingly, our former player, 10-4 with a 2.41 ERA, which was league best. league best 2 walks per 9 innings and 5.3 strikeout to walk ratio. Finished second in the voting for the Giants. And then, as expected, Barajas got some votes after his National League best 18 wins. He finished third in the voting. Our number 1 starter, Jim Lance, 13-7 with a league best 0.99 whip, got some votes. A little surprised that Auclair didn't get some votes after his incredible season with a team best number of strikeouts working out of the bullpen. Some other familiar names, Jeff Dover and Harlan Campeau, also in the voting for the NL Cy Young Award winner. AL MVP is Pat Moody, a guy who we followed since the draft several years ago when he was a guy coming out of Texas. Looked like a future star and certainly is. Led the AL with 660 at-bats, 224 hits, and 145 ribbies in just an exceptional year. And in the National League, not surprisingly, Irving Barunda, the MVP, after leading the NL in batting, on-base percentage, slugging, OPS, WRC+, and WAR in a brilliant year for the Expos. The 30-year-old is now a 3-time most valuable player. Rojas, as expected, got some votes, finished 4th in the voting. Future free agent or potential free agent Ming Ye finished 5th in the voting. Going down the list further, third baseman Ramiro Medina and center fielder Ishmael Velasco also received some votes for NL MVP as well. So right now, as we approach salary arbitration hearings and free agency filings in the next few days, the only question is what happens with Eric Barbarito. His demands have come down significantly, 7 years at $17.4 million a year. So it's not inconceivable to me that he opts into that QO. I think we could trade him away if he did, and I probably would be inclined to trade him away if he did. We've basically got enough-ish money to have him back for another year without having to really strip scouting and player development down that significantly, but would certainly prefer the draft pick compensation at this point. As I said, since I think we can trade him away and get something, we're not going to pull the QO, but with the money that he's looking for now being almost $2 million a year less than what the QO is, even though it wouldn't be a long-term commitment, it's not inconceivable at this point that he might opt into it. It looks like he'd really prefer to stay in Buffalo for the long term. Unfortunately, that's not what we're looking to do at this point. And Barbarito did end up declining the QO, which is fine. He's going to hit free agency. Hopefully he finds a long-term contract for a lot of money, and we'll get a compensatory pick between the first and second round for him next year. And we've made it to free agency. We'll take, as we always do, a quick look at the international free agents, see if there's anyone who, at a very high level, for purposes of speed in this episode, stands out to us. Sergio Talabas looks like a back end of the bullpen kind of pitcher to me. Interesting catcher, Doo-Jin Kim. Like his defense, question whether his bat will really be major league quality, but he's only 22 years old. We'll request a scouting report on him, and it looks like he'd consider a minor league contract. We'll certainly throw a minor league contract out to him right now. I'm guessing he'll probably come back and want more than that. Thus far, not the most impressive class ever of international free agents. But I speak too soon. Left fielder Daniel Aguayoleal looks like a really interesting hitter, switch hitter, corner outfielder, Does have a high work ethic, although some other parts of his personality are not necessarily incredible, but potentially outstanding home run power, really good eye, and we think his contact and his gap power could be interesting. We'll request a scouting report on him, see what he's looking for. Wow, minor league contract, which becomes a guaranteed 1-year major league contract worth $1.8 million if promoted. I don't love giving him the potential opt-out, but I also don't hate bringing a guy like that into our system. I think he may end up going for more than that when all was said and done. Sight unseen, I'm still willing to submit that type of offer to him given the upside we think he may have. He's young. We don't know a ton about him, but not a huge area of need for us either, given the strength we have in our outfield and bats at this point, but still interested in investigating the opportunity to bring him on board. And Tadao Endo, center fielder, pretty good defensively, not an incredible bat, 24 years old. Scout him as well. Another guy who's looking for a minor league contract worth $1.8 million. As much as I like his defense, question the bat. Don't know that I'd offer that to him right now. Free agents. Top of the list, some familiar names we expected to see. Ron Whitmer, the pitcher, Shamar Badio, Ming Ye. Roman Maples does make it. The Cy Young Award winner Pete McLaughlin makes it. So it looks like a lot of the players that we thought would be on the free agent market are on the free agent market. Looking at overall skill among the batters, Rojas, Whitman, yeah, right at the top of the list. Roman Maples is out there. Question is whether the other shortstop that we had talked about, Jaheim Lawal, also is out there, and it looks like he may not be. I mean, we've got our shortstop anyways with Essien. But Jaheim Lawal looks like he did re-up with the Mets. Oh, it looks like they made a QO to him that he accepted at $18.9 million. So only one of the two shortstops we were potentially interested in are on the market, and Maples doesn't have the same range as Essien right now. He's also wrecked physically as opposed to durable. He is certainly a better hitter, particularly in terms of his ability to hit some home runs, and a better offensive player. But with the wrecked injury proneness in the range that's not quite as good as Essien's, I don't mind that we had to trade away a little for Essien. Maples is a guy whose career we followed closely, but $24 million a year certainly going to be out of our price range. Taking a look at the pitchers, McLaughlin and Whitmer, the two top starters on the market as expected. See what our old friend Mr. Barbarito is looking for on the open market. $17.5 million a year, so kind of the range that we thought he was looking for when he opted out of the QO. So probably will be a somewhat quiet free agent period for the Buffalo Wings this year, which it has been for most of the last few seasons. I think the last real big free agent signing we made was the soon-to-be departed Mr. Rojas. But we've tended to just try to lock up our own players like we did with Barajas and Porter this year. And then the trade for Essien certainly spent a lot of that money that we had potentially. But we're going to be all in to try to be as competitive as possible in 2045. Hopefully have a repeat. Essien hopefully will improve our team in terms of our defense at shortstop. Barajas and Porter being back isn't necessarily an improvement, but kind of keeps us close. Barbarito, I think we can replace. And Rojas will be a loss, but with Porter coming back and Reichert being up for a full year with us, feel like we've got the bats to do that. And perhaps most importantly, Mr. Seifu will be back. Not going to be playing an incredibly prominent role, but he will be back with us for a 20th year in 2045. So we'll find out what we actually do in free agency, which probably won't be much in our next episode. If you've got thoughts on what we've done that makes sense, what we've done that doesn't make sense, always helpful for me to hear them. And until our next episode, thanks so much for watching, and hope you have a great day.